Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Big Mike and Ari are proud to present the greatest podcast in the world. No snowflakes allowed, and summer is coming.
It's the podcast that was started by two guys on cigar night. Okay, I'm going to start this one off. A bunch of years ago, one of my favorite authors, Michael Crichton, gave a speech in support of his book, State of Fear. And he talked about how, as an author, he was trying to write a book about people who would make a worldwide global catastrophe. But the problem was he couldn't figure out a global catastrophe that he could convincingly turn into fiction. And one of the things he looked at was Chernobyl. And when he started studying Chernobyl in detail, and I've actually studied it in detail myself, he found that although the news agencies and the UN and other agencies are saying that there are 10, 15, 20, sometimes even people saying 100,000 people died, the number of documentable deaths attributable to the accident at Chernobyl was somewhere in the 50s. Less than 100, somewhere in the 50s. And
like 50 people?
56, I think the actual number was,
right.
But yes. And here's what he had to say in his speech, right? Given this huge, huge error in prediction of how many people would die. He says, most troubling of all, according to the UN report, was that the largest public health problem created by the accident was a damaging psychological impact due to a lack of accurate information. This was manifesting, as I said, negative self-assessments of health, belief in a shortened life expectancy, lack of initiative, and dependency on assistance from the state. In other words, the greatest damage to the people of Chernobyl was caused by bad information. These people weren't blighted by radiation so much as by terrifying but false information. We ought to ponder for a moment exactly what this implies. We demand strict controls on radiation because it's such a health hazard. But clearly Chernobyl suggests that false information can be a health hazard as damaging as radiation. I'm not saying that radiation is not a threat. I'm also not saying that Chernobyl was not a genuinely serious event. But thousands of Ukrainians who didn't die were made invalids out of fear. They were told to be afraid. They were told they were going to die when they weren't. They were told their children would be deformed when they weren't. They were told they couldn't have children when they could. They were authoritatively promised a future of cancer, deformities, pain, and decay. It's no wonder they responded as they did. In fact, we really need to recognize that this kind of human response is very well documented. Authoritatively telling people that they're going to die can itself be fatal. So, in our last episode, we discussed turning power into pain. And what I want to discuss in this episode is turning information into pain.
You know, when I hear that, there's only one thing I can think of. You know, and
what's that?
There's a book called The Four Agreements, written by Don Miguel Ruiz.
I think it's over there somewhere.
It's a phenomenal book. You know, he says in the beginning, before you get to what the four agreements are, he talks about how the 95% of what we tell ourselves is bullshit. Like, it really is. Like, we lie to ourselves. And how we have to overcome that. We're lied to ourselves because of what we see in society, because of what we see in the world, and what we see in our own homes, and like, what did mama tell us, what did daddy tell us, you know, and it's like, what did our siblings tell us? If every single day you were told you were a piece of shit, you're going to stay a piece of shit until you stand up and say, I'm not a piece of shit. If every day you were told you were something special, you're going to think you're something special until life humbles you. You know, we have all this misinformation inside of us that we do need to overcome, that we do need to grow from. Like, you know, it's like when you talk about self-care, the people think that it's just like bubble baths, or like, go and get a massage or something like that. It's not. Self-care is saying that I'm important. Self-care is saying that I'm worth something. That's what it is. Whether you hike, whether you go to like a spa, whether you just play a video game, it doesn't matter. But self-care says that I'm worth something.
Or whether you practice a skill.
Right. But I'm going this way for a particular reason.
Okay.
Because we're talking about overcoming, like misinformation. The first thing that you need to understand is that you're being misinformed. You come to an understanding. The first step in Alcoholics Anonymous says that we have to hit rock bottom. Well, rock bottom is where we say it is. It's not like it may not be the worst point in your life, but what it is, it's that point where you said, I've had enough. Now, it goes on to expand and says, like, now I'm at my lowest point. I can't go no further. That's my weakness. I'm at my weakest point, and say, no. AA will go back and then say, that is the source of your strength, your humility, your understanding of where you're at. You understand that you've been lied to. You understand that you're hurt, and you understand that you have all this misinformation. So then you come to understand that there's better ways of living out there, and that there's a better way of being, right? And it's a process. You got to wake up. You got to come to. You got to like start believing in things that you didn't necessarily believe in prior. And even if you don't, you fake it till you make it. Until you keep doing the same thing. You're showing discipline to overcome misinformation. There's a lot, and it's like I see this all the time. I was talking to this one particular woman. She's a phenomenal athletic trainer, personal trainer. And she helps out many, many people every day. And so these women will come to her, and they'll be starving themselves, and they'll be working out, and they'll be just sipping water all day, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, listen, lady, you're not eating enough. You're not going to lose weight. Your body's in starvation mode. Well, it's calories in, calories out. No, that's not. That's too simplistic. And that's the point that I want to make, that all this is simply too simplistic. Misinformation and overcoming about who and what we could be, that requires a lot. That requires us to get rid of that 95% of bullshit. And it requires us to be thoughts, to be actions, to be feelings, emotions, to be vulnerable. And when we overcome all this, that's when we get to be free.
People want to believe something. They want to believe what they're told. And if it's demonstrated to them that what they're being told is not just wrong, but it's hurting them, it's sometimes very difficult. But sometimes when we have misinformation, or when we have no information, it is definitely better than we have misinformation. I'm going to give you an example. Before 1903, human beings could not use a machine to fly. And if you ever want to have a good laugh, look at the earliest attempts at human flight. You can look at these rolls of tape of people trying to flap their way to human flight, and it's kind of hilarious. But then you realize that all of our attempts to do all the things that we want to be able to do are just that kind of trial and error. And most of the trials we have, most of the time when we try to do the things we want to do, our ideas are just as nutty as some of these early attempts at an airplane. But the fact remains that human flight was possible, and all it took was enough trial and error until somebody was able to get it. So when it was explained that human flight was impossible, it was not that long before the Wright brothers successfully flew, that real experts were saying human beings are not going to fly for quite some time to come. The Wright brothers came around and proved them wrong.
Leonardo da Vinci, he invented the helicopter. His design was you couldn't put it to practice because you couldn't generate enough power on with a
That's a
human.
big problem.
With a human. And interesting enough, his invention also led to the invention of the bicycle, because the way he powered his thing was on basically a bicycle. Go figure that one. But it wasn't until many years later that his theories on aerodynamics were proven true. And it's just a point that I think I want to put in here. So please continue.
So sometimes I would think that the answer to misinformation is just saying no. I'm just not going to believe that. I'm going to try it out for myself. You're telling me that I don't have what it takes to do it, whether it's a diagnosis, whether it's someone telling me, oh, society's not structured to allow you to do the things you want to do in your life, whether it's, oh, you're going to die of this or that or the other thing. And sometimes these things are true, and sometimes the most productive way to say it is just say, this is a whole bunch of frickin' bull. I'm going to prove you wrong.
Well, I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this here with a story. And I think it's a very powerful story that I think will maybe oversimplify the thing, but at the same point give a really important outlook on where we should think and how we should think. My father had cancer many, many years ago, and the doc told him he had 3 months to live. Stage 4, you're going to die. And the doc said, go fuck yourself. My dad said to the doc, go fuck yourself. Don't take away my hope. Hope is a powerful thing. Don't take it away. Misinformation takes away hope. And you know what? It's scary when we're people who don't have hope. If hope creates beautiful things, but the lack of hope creates horrors. And it's something that we need to be aware of, that when we're looking at all the misinformation out there, that if everything's horrible, we're not going to feel safe. And we don't feel safe anymore. Not in America. No one feels safe anymore because this world has changed so much. And we're just in this place of being lied to every day. So much so that the truth offends people. And that's the scary part.
You mentioned about hope, but hope is a double-edged sword, though. There is an experiment, and I could find it for you if you want. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes, where people were interviewed about their state of happiness, and all the people who were interviewed in this case had to get a colostomy. They had to get part of their intestines removed, and their solid waste would come out through a port in the side of their abdomen. There are certain colostomy procedures that are permanent, and there are certain colostomy procedures that are reversible after the intestines heal or whatever. And it was found that the people who were told right up that this is permanent, you just got to adapt. There's no way to restore normal bowel function. They actually turned out to be happier than the people who were told, hey, maybe one day this will be reversed. And the reason they were happier is very simple. They said, okay, they took that information on board and said, I'm going to adapt to this change in my life, and I am going to do what it takes to get everything else I need to get done. And as a result of this not having the hope of maybe one day my ship will come in and everything will be restored to what it once was, they say, okay, this is the new normal, and we're going to adapt to it, and we're going to make the best of it, and that's that. Sometimes hope isn't always what we want. Sometimes hoping for what we can't get is just as harmful as not having hope of what we could get.
I have a piece of information that I'm just going to leave out there and let you guys come up with with what you think about it. I've done many suicides and overdoses over the years, where my personal life and my work, people who are dying in front of me, and I'll tell you, the most common expression on their face was surprise. This is anecdotal, and I'm not. This has just been my experience.
Surprised about what?
They're about to die. We are creatures of hope. Without hope, we are nothing. We will be destroyed. And it's like we literally have surprise on our face when we're about to die. We think that we'll survive anything. We believe that God won't do this to me. But we all die at some point. It's about how we live that's the important thing. And how we overcome that misinformation, how we overcome what other people have done or taken from us. 56 people didn't die because of Chernobyl. Hundreds of thousands did because of the radiation effects, but they didn't all die right away. And some of them are still dying to this day. Same thing happened with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But we didn't want to believe it. It's too much for us to understand. And whether we want to understand the truth or not, that's one thing. But we all have the power to overcome whatever it is that's hurting us. And we all have the power to overcome all that misinformation, all the lies that we've been told.
Or at least just to make the best of it.
I hear that. All right, well, that's our thoughts for today, folks. I want to thank you all for listening. You all have a good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Whatever it is, wherever you are, all the best.